So if it's okay, sure, we'll start with Becki. You're very welcome, Becki. Can you tell us a little bit about your film?
Yeah, so my film is called Piece of Cake, an ode to the lockdown baker, and I started making it during June. I was actually furloughed from my job, and it was sort of a great opportunity to sort of get back into filmmaking. And at the time, I thought I wanted to do something around the pandemic, but I wasn't sure what. So my other hobby is also baking, and I love baking on the weekends. And during lockdown, obviously everybody sort of started getting into baking, and you had people running out of flour in the supermarkets. It was a really weird time. So I wanted to make a film based around the sort of people who had only started doing baking during lockdown, their successes, their failures, and trying to live up to sort of the Instagram worthiness of everybody else's sort of, sourdoughs or cakes or whatever they're making. And so that's sort of, I went for a more light-hearted version of that with my film.
Fantastic, and such a great idea, and especially since the whole nation took to baking, well, especially people who had time and didn't have busy lives. So that is super. And I mean, films come in all shapes and sizes and genres, and it is so important to have a film like this, that is light-hearted but is very much of its time, and it obviously relates so much to the lockdown period. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much. I mean, did you have any major challenges filming it in lockdown, or how did it go for you in terms of the process?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I sort of started thinking about I wanted to make a film, I sort of did think, well, I can't really get actors in because you can't get, you can't really leave your house sort of properly, and you can't meet up with people. So I thought, well, actors are sort of off the table. So if I'm going to make a film, I knew I had to sort of make it with the people in my household, and sort of in the film, it's my hands that are basically within the film. So challenges was making it as well is I had to bake the things as I was filming, which is no easy challenge. It's not easy to film and it's not easy to bake at the same time. It's even more difficult. I did have a few sort of spillages here and there, but the equipment went mostly fine.
Super, that is brilliant. That's such a good backstory as well to how you got back into film and filmmaking. Have you much experience in the world of filmmaking already? Like, is this something that you're already really keen on?
Yeah, so I studied film sort of all the way through school up until uni. I have a degree in film, but I hadn't been able to make a film since I left university, basically because I didn't have the time or the software or the equipment. And just during the pandemic, all these things kind of came together, and I just had the resources to do it and the time. And I thought this would be a great subject to do it as well. It's very topical, but also sort of a bit more light-hearted.
Brilliant, absolutely. And also now that Bake Off is back on our television screens, it's even more timely. You should do some negotiations to get it screened in the ad break for it. Well, that is brilliant. Becki, thank you so much. And audiences will really enjoy this, when it's screened as part of Cinemagic in this showcase. So we look forward to that. So thanks a million. I will go now to Polly. You're very welcome, Polly. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. So my film, I'm Polly Creed, and my film is called Alone Once. And it's based on a poem by a playwright and writer called Jess Moore, who had this kind of very, I suppose, a kind of very extreme but also quite common experience. So she lives on her own in London, and kind of had 5 months basically of being completely isolated. So Alone Once is kind of part film, part poem. It looks at the kind of the thing of touch and the importance of touch and what it means not to be touched for kind of 5 months, kind of through the lens of this one woman we follow from the start of her day to the end. But it's also about kind of female sexuality and the difference between sort of being alone and being lonely, and kind of looking at and kind of subverting some of the ideas we might have about that. Yeah, and I think also it's kind of, we filmed it in black and white, which also it's about kind of elevating the everyday, and really kind of probing those experiences that many of us shared together, but we were also kind of isolated with. yeah, that's kind of the main overview, I think.
That's excellent. And that's the thing. The whole lockdown experience was a mixture of highs and lows. And you have a film about baking and everything around that. And then you have a film like yours, and, you know, you can sort of go as deep as you want with it, you know, or you can sort of, you know, look at it as a, you know, off its time as well, and off the situation that everybody found themselves in, but also tying it into the poem. So that's what I love so much about young filmmaker films as well. And, you know, everyone was experiencing this experience, yet, you know, your own sort of thought process and your own experiences, and, you know, the way everyone is dealing with the situation comes across so well on film. And what better way than film to sort of articulate this? So well done. Congratulations on being shortlisted. Thanks, Polly, and really, really good to just get that backstory as to why you wanted to make it and why this sort of theme came through in your film. Thank you. Gregor, how are you? Nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you, Clara. Hi, everyone. Yeah, this is strange. I haven't really been participating in like Zoom calls anymore since I quit my job, and this film was all made at the time when I still had a full-time job. And yeah, it kind of started. It's called COVID MP4, just because that's what it was meant to be, just an MP4 file on my desktop, and it turned out to be a short film. And yeah, it started as a visual diary during my time when I was still in London, and I was always, you know, a 9-to-5 job, so I would always like film during the time of the golden hour. And the story is basically a story of a dancer that tries to break free during the lockdown, and it's got lots of surreal and dreamlike imagery in it. And yeah, the film could be understood either as a metaphor, but also as kind of glimpses of the past, present, and future, the kind of reflective aspect of the quarantine that I believe loads of people were experiencing at the time. Yeah.
Thank you. And, you know, were you tasked with making a film anyway during this time, or was it something that just sort of organically came? You know, you sort of had an idea and then it sort of was built upon in terms of saving it to your desktop and seeing what happens, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it started just to kind of occupy my free time in the evenings, because obviously there wasn't a crazy amount to do. And I kind of like pulled out the interesting bits, and I started to see some sort of narrative in there. And then I connected it to a dream that I used to have, because I keep it like a dream journal as well. And I kind of connected it with the dream journal, with the dream of a dancer that I had previously, and just elaborated on that and created this. Yeah.
Super, thank you. Well, we look forward to screening it to the Cinemagic audiences. And that's the thing as well with the virtual festival this year. It is very different, but we're sort of embracing it in the fact that more, hopefully, and wider and deeper audiences will get to experience and watch each of your films. So we're embracing it, you know, in that virtual platform this year, and that's why we sort of wanted to try and keep this sort of community that we normally would get together, you know, and get used together, and, you know, sort of hear a little bit about each other, and rather than being isolated as such. Thank you. Okay, Cameron, you're very welcome. Over to you.
Hi. Okay. So my film is 2020 A Corona Odyssey. And yeah, it's interesting. There's lots of different ways that people are going to go about approaching the topic of Corona. But for me, like, one of the big things that stood out, particularly at the beginning, was how many kind of monumental kind of moments, like events, things happen that you just would never imagine, you couldn't write. And it all happened in such kind of quick succession. I remember kind of when COVID, we had COVID cases in the UK, but it was all under control, and then it was very quickly not under control. And then kind of music events, sports events started cancelling, and then, you know, schools cancelled, exams cancelled, lockdown cancelled, and lockdown kind of happened. And then, you know, the Prime Minister was in intensive care. I mean, all these things you could just, like, huge things. And I just kind of wanted to try and bottle that all up, all this kind of like chaos and this sense of like, kind of, oh my goodness, like, you know, you thought you'd seen it all, and then this next something else happens. And I wanted to try and put that all into the film. And so yeah, it starts off with the kind of protagonist by a tree, listening to his iPod, and the iPod's intercepting kind of futuristic, airwaves of like speeches and kind of headlines that kind of happened throughout the pandemic. And it starts off kind of with kind of the public figures, the kind of the Boris Johnson speech, the Queen's speech, Professor Chris Whitty's kind of some sound bites from him, and then I kind of wanted to then move into the experiences of like the everyday person. So towards the end of it, we get into I got sound bites from news reports and interviews with people, and these interviews were kind of in that present time. So these people were talking about their present rather than kind of recollecting it, which I think had a kind of particular poignance to it. But yeah, they were kind of talking about things about, you know, people couldn't losing their jobs, like didn't know how they were going to kind of make ends meet. You know, nurses talking about lack of PPE, all these things, and it was slightly. I wanted to I layered over these kind of clapping and clap for carers kind of plots and stuff, kind of trying to almost create a point of like, are we listening to these people? Are we hearing them? Because we're hearing the headlines very clearly, but are we hearing this? And then it all kind of builds into this kind of chaos, and then it's relieved, and it's trying to ask a few questions in that sense. Yeah.
Super, thank you so much. And that's the thing, it's that whole thing about, you know, real life is stranger than fiction. And
yes.
Certainly true in 2020. And fantastic. And you know what, it's like a brilliant way obviously to document the last 6 months, 9 months kind of thing. And you know, it's something that, you know, you could even have at the end of the year when it's like the year in review kind of thing, like goodness knows what will happen between now and Christmas.
Yeah, it's like a bit of a timestamp for now, which I think was another motive for doing it. Trying to, you know, I know friends who've written diaries and stuff, and I thought, how can I kind of capture the moment? And this was my kind of
excellent idea. Brilliant. Well, I know that audiences will really enjoy that, and exactly from, you know, Boris Johnson to like then the next of it was Prince Charles as well. You know, it's unbelievable. And when you do take a step back, film is actually a brilliant way to categorize it all and document it all. And I suppose the highs and the lows of everything as well. So fantastic. Thank you so much. So yes, that is another shortlisted film that we're very proud of. We just felt it was very much, you know, of its time, and as you say, a time stamp, and very well executed. So well done on being shortlisted. Then over to Mercer. Hi Mercer, thanks a million for joining us today.
Hello, thank you. My film is called Soon, and it follows a uni student who returns home in the midst of the pandemic to kind of greet the places in nature which she knew as a child, only to find that they've been taken over and, you know, frequented now by the local people of her town. And she has this battle, you know, in her mind of trying to, you know, be in this new space, and finds that she's now in a place where she's combining two worlds, the world of home and the world of her university life, and all the different people that come from both sides. And for me, this was what my coronavirus experience was, which was a clashing of two worlds when I came back from uni in the summer, or which, you know, was a year cut short by the pandemic. And I think the circumstances are unique for students in that they're getting this premature end to a year, and I felt like it could be this huge dent in like people's development, you know, like for me it was like it was a lot about losing independence and a forward momentum into the world. And I felt I was being brought back and restrained in this, you know, childhood world. And so that's what the film is trying to explore, and looking at just again the two worlds of nature and the public and private, so that, you know, your private world. So as we observed during the pandemic, the streets were emptied, and the places in nature, the slightly more intimate private places, became more populated as people searched for, you know, things to fill their time with. And And I think similar to Polly's idea of the touch thing, I was looking at how you could tell a love story with just hands. And again, you know, so exploring like the distance of two people through the pandemic has created, and the inability to reach out and connect physically.
Excellent, Mercer, and that juxtaposition of nature as well, and you know, that whole thing around more people were going out in nature, and those areas that normally were quiet and untouched were suddenly being overrun with people and things like that. And that is just a lovely sort of visual thing as well, and you know, to process that and sort of put that as the juxtaposition, things were sort of turned on their side, you know, with life, I suppose. So yes, thank you, and audiences will get great insight as well, again through your film, and I think just very sensitively and tenderly and honestly told as well. So thank you.
So I'm Claudia, and I'm a self-made independent filmmaker, interdisciplinary artist and writer, and I made the film Lonely about a month into lockdown in April, because I had some footage left over from going to Los Angeles a year ago, and I started house sitting in a new space. So I turned into the surreal filmmaker of my dreams, walking around with a GoPro attached to my head, filming on my phone, whatever I could find. And it's a short film that is black and white, and it's not got any screenwriting, and I'm playing 7 different characters. So it's very experimental, it's very amateur, and it's very much up to the interpretation of the viewer of what you want the narrative to be.
And is it something that completely was inspired with lockdown or in lockdown, or did you have any sort of idea of it, you know, that you always sort of wanted to get it made, but then lockdown did sort of spur you on as such?
Lockdown definitely spurred me on. It's kind of, my film work is kind of more of an exploration into my life story. So I go back and forth in time a lot, looking at trauma of past events or dreams in the future, and I mash up the time frame. So there's feelings when I go into the scenes where I'm in Los Angeles, where it's a different time to where I'm enacting in the house location. And I think with my work, I'm always trying to subtly reveal more about my life story. It's autobiographical, but without giving it all away, I guess.
Yes. And is it something then with entering it to a festival like Cinemagic or other festivals, for example, that, you know, what are your aims for the film? Like, what's your vision for it? Is it something that you obviously do want people to see and experience and take away something specifically from?
I love the surrealist film era, so that's part of wanting to get my film out there. And I love silent film, I love experimental film, but I think it's part of a series, I guess. But this film feels important because it was such a big release. I felt like the world was crashing at the beginning of lockdown, but actually I was so cooped up in this. I made that film in a month, and it just felt like it was a euphoric feeling to be in this film world with myself only. And I did want to share that because I think the pandemic has made our lives so mundane and uncreative, and I feel like it's a trip into another person's world, and it's not like ideology led. It's more like dream state led. You can it allows you the chance to kind of make your own choice, I think, on what you think of that piece of art, as it's more of a piece of art rather than a book or a story. It's more non-narrative. So I think that, I wanted to share it as my most non-narrative piece, I think.
And what do you find challenging about filmmaking? Not necessarily just this film, but just as an artist and a filmmaker, what is the most challenging aspect to that for you?
I think so. I didn't do that. I didn't make Lonely on a budget at all. There was zero budget, and I think that is challenging because you might want to have other actors, you might want to have props or things in the scene. Like I used a pineapple in Lonely as a baby, and I use all sorts of things to describe other things because that was all that I had. But I think that's the biggest challenge, but that's also what makes Lonely. I think it's quite obvious that I'm not on a film set, I'm just in the house.
Yeah.
But if I was to make it with a budget, then there would be other actors. It would be a lot less work it wouldn't just be me in it. I'm the only person in it. So I think I'm not too challenged by making the storyline because I kind of have a way that I make my realist storyline happen. I don't find the creativity a challenge, but I think that the logistics can be a challenge to make that dream state viewable.
Yeah, and is that something then, that you as a filmmaker and an artist, and not necessarily speaking for others in your position, but what sort of support would you like going forward from bodies and the likes of Cinemagic and different organisations that are there to support emerging filmmakers? I know normally it's about collaboration and networking opportunities and everything, and obviously that is all stunted at the moment, but that's why we're trying to do a lot of this stuff online and just have a chat with people and let people know that there still is a community there, and there's opportunities to sort of feel connected to the industry even sitting at home.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is all about who you know and making these connections, like through film festivals, which is good. But there is money for the arts somewhere. I want to know where the money is so that we can make more films. I want to find out where those resources are. I want to find out where you need to go to get set design stuff. I think doing the film festival thing has definitely opened up connections, even just through emails. People emailing you have been like, you got through the film and then you have a short email thread.
Yeah.
You did that person before, you're then connected to that festival in some way. Things like this, I've done a few of these Zooms.
Yes.
It's, even if you only just a few people see you and agree with you or feel inspired by you, then I think that's all good, and you never know who might contact you or see some kind of light in your work. So I think it's about being in the public. The film festival, it allows your film to be in the public eye, doesn't it? So that's important.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.